Now that we have our 3D Benchy fully downloaded, now we're going to be taking it and putting it into a software known as a slicer, so that it'll generate something known as G-code that we can then send to our 3D printer. Now, a slicer software is very simply a bit of software where it takes any 3D object, any size, scale, anything like that, and is able to slice it into hundreds or sometimes thousands of layers, a little bit like a cross-section. And in every single layer, you can then make a path where the nozzle is going to move, and within it we can also have all of our settings. Now, our settings within it is going to be dictating if our part is hollow or not, just how much of the inside is filled in, how fast is it printing, how hot is it going to be printing, exactly how many layers is it going to have, how fast that will dictate, everything is going to be in it. So often when you're troubleshooting, it's usually a very good, a very good place to start to actually say, hey, is it my hardware or my software that's actually producing some of my issues? For the slicer software that we're going to be using in this track will be Cura, which is made by Ultimaker, which is a brand that makes a lot of very, very high-end 3D printers. So you can simply go to Cura.com and download the newest version of Cura. Currently it is 4.12. And with this free download, we can actually say exactly what size 3D printer we have, upload any files, change around our settings, and then pass it out on the other way. Now this software is very, very simple to use. If you spend maybe half an hour playing around with it, you'll become very, very familiar with this. And we're only going to be messing around with the very basic settings today, so nothing too intensive. We'll be covering some of the settings that are a little bit more important and a little bit more technical and engineering-y in a couple weeks, but for now, just understanding the basics and getting a few prints down so you have that repetition going along with it, that's going to be just fine for us. So right now I have Cura 4.12 opened up, and when you open up, it may actually prompt you to say, hey, what type of printer do you have? I've been using this software for a very long time, so all my information is all built in, but I'm going to go through the process how you would see it the first time you're opening it. When you first start, you're going to say, hey, what type of printer do you have? Is it a networked printer or a non-networked printer? The Ender-3, which cannot connect to the internet, is going to be a non-networked printer, and it is a very, very popular system. So we're just going to be scrolling down to Creality, which is the maker of this printer, Creality 3D right there. And we are looking for the Ender-3, which is right there. You can see there's lots and lots of different printers that they do. A lot of them are the exact same type of build, but they just get larger and larger and larger. So you can print taller print, wider print. You can print as large as you really want, actually. For us, we're just going to be adding on the Creality Ender-3 for right now. And you can see when you pass into this, it has all of your volume already put in there. It knows exactly where the head is going to be, and it's already put in some G-code on the start and on the end. And if you put your cursor over it, it'll actually give you a little description about what all of that is, which is very, very handy. I highly recommend you guys actually taking a look through and seeing exactly what all of these settings mean. For now, we're just going to say next, and now it has an actual blank void on the inside. With your mouse, you're able to zoom in and out with the scroll key, and with the right click, we can orbit all the way around, so you can say exactly what everything is. And then for panning, I'm just clicking on my scroll wheel, so we can move all around and view every single part of our bed that we need to. For this starting portion, we don't see any really interesting tools because we don't have anything launched in there very yet. So right now I'm going to be going and opening up my file in there. So I'm going to be clicking Control-O to open up our launcher so we can see 3D Benchy right here, and it will then pop into our build plate. And we're able to take a look at all of the different details on our boat. You'll notice there's lots of difficult things like shallow and steep angles, holes, bridges, archways, text that is going to be vertical, and text on the underside. So there's lots and lots of really tricky details in there which make this a really, really good test to print. So when we click on our little boat, it should highlight in blue, and you'll notice that we have our Cartesian coordinate system in there, where we're able to move our Benchy all around the build plate. Now, against what you want to do, it's actually not the best idea to always print in the very, very center of your build plate because it's going to be worn out, and after maybe a couple months, you actually won't have any of that grippy surface on your printer and all of your parts will just fall off. So please, I do recommend just printing at random different areas every single time. I like to go clockwise and kind of work on all 4 corners, and then in the middle every once in a while just to distribute the wear and tear over your build plate. For now, we'll put it in, the front little corner here, right where it auto homes. And you'll notice this little toolbar popped up as well. So this is moving along and changing as we go. So we can alter our X, Y, our Z as well. Technically it can be changed, but it always gets brought down to the build plate, so it's always going to be touching and printing as best as possible. Further down, we also have things like scale, where we can make our parts as large as we want, but if I release, you'll see this has turned this kind of stripy camouflage color. And this is basically saying, hey, your part is either too large, it cannot fit in your printer, or it is actually outside of the bounds of what can be printed. So if I right click and say center selected, it is back to yellow, which is meaning, hey, this is actually fitting within this bounds, perfectly fine, but I don't need this, so I'm gonna go back to 100. And I can also uncheck this uniform scaling if I want to stretch the Benchy in any weird ways that I want to. But we're just gonna keep this as 100. For the rotating, I'm able to click and drag all these wheels and move the Benchy around in all different directions, which can be handy or not. I can also click on all of these arrows to then really quickly do 90-degree turns, which is also very, very handy. But what you'll also know is some buttons over here as well. Let's say I accidentally import my model and it's at a bit of an angle. And when I do this, it means I really don't have any surface area grabbing it onto the bed, so I want to change that. So I can click this button right here that says select face to align to the build plate. Basically just means when I click this, I can click this surface and it will get pulled down to the bed, so I've got the best chance of printing. You also have things like mirror, which I very, very rarely use. You can ignore that for the most part. The per model settings, you can play around with that, but it's not going to be very necessary for the basics. And then a support blocker, again, we won't be touching on this too much today. If you go into the upper right-hand corner, then you'll notice some settings. Now, this is the basics section of the Cura software where it can only change a couple things. But to be honest, this is far too basic, I found. It just, not only is it not enough information, but it's kind of disingenuous where it kind of promotes you to not go further into the software and learn more things, which we do want you to do. So I'm going to go ahead and click custom right here, and then you have access to all of your settings. Now these are my personal settings that I have calibrated for all of my 3D printers, so it may look a little bit different to you. By all means, slow down the video and take all of my settings. They're completely free. But if you have some settings in there that you want to add or get rid of, then you can move your cursor over to any of these tabs, and then you can see every single setting. And now I know a lot of you may be going, oh my gosh, there's so many settings. And yeah, you're right, there's over 400. Most of them you will never ever use. A lot of them are experimentation, and you really don't need to touch on them too much. But if you want to go in any of them and you would like to add it to your software, then you can just click the check mark and it will add into your toolbar, or you can uncheck it and it gets rid of it. I highly recommend going through and just trying learning and brute force it, and just seeing what every single setting actually goes through. There's lots and lots of YouTubers that go into exactly how to make this, but as you go through Cura, you'll be able to learn lots and lots of information. Something like quality, where it will actually dictate either how fast your print goes, which if it goes faster, it usually means it's not going to look as good, or maybe going in the opposite where, hey, it's going to take a longer amount of time, but I'm going to get a better end product. You can also dictate exactly how many walls in there. Remember, having more walls in a part will make it significantly stronger. You can then also dictate how much infill you have in there. Now, infill is how much material do you have on the very inside. If you have a higher percentage, it's going to be more filled in. If you set it at 0, it will be completely hollow. 20 is too much. I usually max out at about maybe 12%, and I'm going to change this to gyroid just because it looks a lot cooler. For our material, these settings are okay, but what we set in our PLA configuration of 210 and 50, or 210 and 60, excuse me, that will be a little bit more common to go in there. Our speed is also going to be dictating exactly how good it looks. Too fast and it won't look as nice. But we're going to be going through all these in a little bit more depth later down the line. But let's say all of these settings look good. Then I'm just going to click slice. So now with our model fully sliced, I'm going to go ahead and click preview. And this will show us exactly what our 3D print looks like layer by layer. I'm just using this little toggle on the right hand side, and we're able to go through every single layer and see all of the cross sections within. That little setting that I said for the infill, the gyroid, this is what gyroid is. It's a series of waves that go back and forth, and they change rotational directions every single time. This is a relatively new mathematical shape which distributes stress all in different areas. So there is no weak direction, it's equally strong in all different areas. It's what I recommend you guys to use for your 3D prints. But within this, we can also have a little toggle on the bottom, and this will show us what all of our printing nozzle is doing at each time. You can go through and even check out the very first layer, where it's laying down a little border at the very beginning to purge out any material that's been stagnating in your nozzle, and then it will go ahead and start on the text on the very first layer. Then it will round those out, do a little border, and then fill in the gaps, and then work on your next layer. And checking this out and going through all the layers and making sure everything looks good is always a really good step to do. And furthermore, down in the bottom right hand corner, it's saying that this is going to take about 1 hour and 49 minutes, which is perfectly normal for a benchy. This is going to take 10 grams of material, so within your kilogram of material, if you want to, you can print 100 of these tugboats. Don't know why you'd need to, but you absolutely can. And then it's saying it will take about 3.48 meters of material. But that's not really a metric that anyone uses, so you can kind of discard that. There's also a little eye right next to here, so you can see exactly how much time is being spent on every single portion of your printer. Then you can go ahead and click Save to Disk, or you can take your SD card from your printer, plug it into your laptop, and say, hey, I want to save it directly to my removable drive. Then plug it into your printer and get it going.